Top Med Talk.
Hello, welcome to Top Med Talk. I'm Andy Cumpstey and I'm here at the evidence-based perioperative medicine meeting in Dingle. It's been another fantastic 3 days here on the wild west coast of Ireland, and I'm really enjoying recording a couple more of our new series of perioperative profiles. And I'm absolutely delighted to be inviting Professor Kate Leslie to join me for her profile. Now, it's hard to know where to start introducing Kate. There's been so many things to say about her amazing career, and obviously we've been co-hosting Top Med Talk together now for a couple of years. But Kate is a specialist anaesthetist and head of anaesthesia research at the Royal Melbourne Hospital and an honorary professor at the University of Melbourne. She's a former president of the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists Council, and I'm embarrassed to say she's a much better skier than me, but we can talk about that a bit later. Perhaps most importantly though, Kate's a really great, fun, fantastic person to spend time with.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Andy.
We should start right at the very beginning. There's so many things we could talk about, but before we dive into all your amazing research achievements and clinical achievements and all those other highlights that we will get to and will come, where did your journey start? Where did Kate grow up? Was it in Melbourne or was it somewhere else?
I grew up in Melbourne. My mother was a nurse and my father was an agricultural chemist. So it was a scientific family. And my father was fascinated by the natural world, and he introduced my mother and their 3 daughters, of which I'm the oldest, to bushwalking and camping. And we used to go on great camping trips around Victoria with Dad's scientific friends and Mum's nursing friends. I was regaled with stories about scientific discovery, or mainly kind of funny stories, and also about all the great times that my mother and her friends had in hospitals. And Mum also instilled in all of us a sense of adventure. Mum packed up in the 1950s and moved to the UK and did private nursing there and had great adventures on her motor scooter all around Europe. And so she was a driving force to get me and my sisters out the door and to university, which she always wanted to go to but never could, and also to explore the world.
She was a keen skier as well, I believe. Is that right?
Both my parents were, yes, back in the olden days with wooden skis and actual seal skins to walk up and down the mountains.
I think one of the first presentations I saw you give, which I won't say when it was, but it wasn't that long ago, but you put up a wonderful photo of your mum on a snowy mountain somewhere with wooden skis. And yeah, it was a pretty amazing photo, amazing shot. As you say, that sense of adventure has lived through, but been a very strong influence in the rest of your life and career.
A young person came up to me after a talk I gave where I had that picture up, and they went, "Was that me when I was young?" Which was disappointing. But anyway, yeah, that was where I started. So I went straight from living in suburban Melbourne to the University of Melbourne, where I did medicine. I didn't always want to be a doctor. To be honest, I probably did it more out of, what I'd learnt from my mother and father, but also academic snobbery. That's what people who were good at science did. But as soon as I got there, I realised that, that was the career for me. So I never looked back in terms of being a doctor.
And was it always anaesthesia, perioperative medicine that caught your eye at medical school and beyond, or did that come later?
No, I'm distractible and attracted to novelty, so that every time I did a new specialty, I became sort of passionate about that. So I was never really focused on anaesthesia until I got to my first anaesthesia rotation. And then what I think I liked about it most was the team of people, and it was helping our vulnerable people at a critical point in their life. And it was immediate, and it was also a process. I love a process. I love being organised and cracking on, which is the favourite term of the director of my department, Professor Darryl Williams. So, yeah, I just sort of happened to enjoy it, and then I did it. And I was always a conscientious student. I worked hard. I didn't work really, really hard. I'm a bit of a lightweight, staying up late at night. So I worked away and, I did okay.
And as always, I suspect that's a slight modesty there, Kay, when you say I did okay. It normally means you did exceptionally well from what I've seen so far. But We can come back to that in a second. But in terms of going through medical school then, was that at the point you started getting involved with research as well, or was that further down the career track?
No, what happened was that I got into anaesthetic training in my third post-medical school year, which about half of the cohort did at that time. And I got my primary exam at the first sitting in August. And I became really fascinated while I was studying pharmacology about pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics and the delay between the administration of a drug and its effect on the brain, which is known as hysteresis. I just marched into the academics office at my hospital and volunteered to do some research. And that person was Dr. David Crankshaw, who was very generous in giving me my start in anaesthesia research and was my first mentor.
So how do you go from there to leading multi-centre trials? I mean, what's the progression, the pathway from starting off in one centre, doing one small project, to networking with like-minded colleagues around, I guess, first your local area in Melbourne, but then pretty quickly the whole of Australia and beyond?
Well, yeah, I went and worked at St Vincent's Hospital with Dr. Brendan Silbert, another great mentor, and then I left the country and I went to the University of California in San Francisco, where I did neuroanaesthesia. It was my clinical specialty, and I worked in the lab of Dr. Daniel Sessler. He was another fantastic mentor. I was exposed to experimental research, volunteer research, but also to some clinical work that he was doing with colleagues like Dr. Andrea Kurtz. I did 3 or 4 projects with him, and I'd already done 3 or 4 before I went there. So when I got back, I wrote up an MD, which is a doctoral degree in research. I wrote that up based on publications. So I got that, and then I thought, well, I've done that, but I actually don't know anything about research. So I'll do a Master of Public Health. So I did that, and that was very instructive. I mean, if I can give advice to emerging leaders, it's better to do the MPH first, because then you might have a chance of designing a study that's going to be able to find out something important. And that coincided with the first trial of the ANZCA Clinical Trials Network, which was the master trial. That was established by Dr. John Rigg and Dr. Konrad Jamrozik, who was an epidemiologist, and they showed that epidural analgesia was no different to intravenous analgesia for major surgery. And the emerging research leader in that group was Dr. Paul Miles. Once they finished the master trial, I was a minor player in that. Paul and I got together and did the Be Aware trial. And it was kind of my area of interest, awareness and learning and unconscious learning and so forth. But Paul was the one that the penny dropped for him that we needed to investigate a high-risk group. Because everyone would say, oh, this is the holy grail of anaesthesia, to find a monitor to prevent awareness, but you'd need to study 50,000 people. So we only studied a small fraction of that number, but we picked a really high risk group. And so we showed that the bispectral index monitor reduced the incidence of awareness in patients at high risk of awareness. And that study really fueled the fire of the ASA Clinical Trials Network.
So for people that are listening to this who, I find it hard to believe, but there might be some people that have never heard of the ANZCA Clinical Trial Network, but they may not know the scale of the network or what it's achieved. Could you give people a summary of what it's evolved into now, some of its achievements over the years, and quite just how big a thing grew out of that Be Aware trial in the group?
So the fundamental, kernel or seed for the trial was the support of the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists. And it was really quite visionary that when Paul Miles and others proposed a clinical trials network to the college, Professor Michael Cousins, who's a quite famous pain medicine researcher and advocator, he took that idea to the council and persuaded the council of the college to fund the trials network, by which I mean staff, space, and structures, finance, HR, etc. And that's really quite unique. And what that did was it embedded the trials network within the college so that all of the college fellows and trainees can have a sense of ownership and of pride in the network. And it also means that at sites in public hospitals, private hospitals, rural hospitals in Australia, New Zealand and Hong Kong, there are anaesthetists who are willing and able and in fact enthusiastic about being part of these trials. So we've done 10 or 15 trials since then. They all with thousands of patients, most of them funded since the Be Aware trial by large grants from our national peer-reviewed funders in Australia, New Zealand and Hong Kong. We've recruited about 75,000 patients and we've had about $75 million of funding. I'm sure I've got those numbers wrong. And for an up-to-date estimate, you can go to the ANZCA website. But it's really been a great journey for all of us. People often ask us how we get people to cooperate.
That was my next question.
Yes. And we've reflected on this quite a lot. I think it has something to do with being from Australia and New Zealand. We are way down at the bottom of the earth. There are lots of things about the structure of our societies. It's a very flat structure. It's not hierarchical at all. And there's a great sense of there's something called the tall poppy syndrome. If you stick your head up, you'll get it cut off. But what I mean by that is that everyone's got a chance to shine. No one takes themselves too seriously. And we've got a self-deprecating sense of humour. Also, we have compulsory voting in Australia. So we have this sort of feeling that it is normal to contribute to electing the government and to doing anaesthesia clinical trials.
And I think it's fair to say that the ANZCA Clinical Trials Network has almost become the envy of many nations around the world. It's been such a successful group, such a successful organisation. We've certainly tried to emulate it here in the UK with the Perioperative Medicine Clinical Trials Network, but I think that is one of the models that we've all been trying to copy. And you've been a real driving force of that almost right the way through. Could you maybe summarise you said there's been a number of trials, but some of your highlights on the way, the trials you've worked on that you've been really, really pleased with?
Look, they're like children, aren't they? I love all of them. My two favourites, I guess, three. Be Aware was very special for us. I absolutely loved working with Tim Short and Doug Campbell on the balanced anaesthesia trial. That was light and deep general anaesthesia and 1 year mortality in older adults having major surgery. And we showed that there was no difference between deep and light anaesthesia, which was good news because it means that anaesthetists don't have to try and toe the line in either direction and they can direct their attention to other things like blood pressure, for example. The other trial I'm really proud of is the SNAP study. Just before the pandemic, I wrote an editorial in Anesthesiology about sugammadex, and I was discussing that with my great friend and colleague David Story, the chair of anaesthesia at the University of Melbourne. This was in the early days of the pandemic. We decided to take the leap and mount a big study about that. Of course, we couldn't meet inside. We were wearing masks, and we cooked it up on a walk around Royal Park, which is near our hospital in Melbourne. We applied for the grant 5 times and got it. We recruited our first patient 5 months later, and we recruited 3,500 patients in just under 2 years at 45 sites in Australia, New Zealand and Hong Kong. We are analysing the results at the moment, and I hope to come back on top early next year to reflect on the results. I'm particularly proud of SNAP because I think we developed a really fun, engaging study. We had lots of communication with our sites. We had chocolates. We had bottles of schnapps. We had a lot of fun. And I think that's another thing. Life's hard. And a lot of our investigators and our anaesthetists at the coalface are like, oh, great, let's do the study on this patient. It's going to help medicine. It's going to be super interesting to try and implement the protocol faithfully. And I can't wait to see the results. And in our multi-centre trials, there are, 100 trial coordinators, and they are working really hard at the sites, finding patients, recruiting them, collecting all the data, cleaning the data. And, it can be demoralising work at times, the patients say no and stuff, and they're so resilient. And then we've got our brilliant ANZCA CTN manager, currently Karen Golding. We've had a few others. Her predecessors have been fantastic. And also we've got trial managers at the major universities where we do our studies. So, you can get it very involved in your little niche of medicine, and being involved in research really broadens your outlook about what other fantastic health professionals are up to.
I think we often talk about patients being the heart of what we do, and of course that's true, but I'm not sure the patients necessarily realise just how big that team is that's working around them to deliver that research. It's a really good point to mention, I think, Kate.
Well, we should thank the patients too. They put their trust in us as researchers, not to harm them, and they also, they appreciate the opportunity to get meaning out of their disease or injury that's above just their experiences receiving healthcare. So we have to thank them too. It's a great big family of people to thank.
And I think there's been a number of challenges you've experienced along the way that you've had to overcome. Would you be prepared to share some of those with our listeners?
Certainly, I've had a charmed life. It's sort of hard to think of it as, Kate Leslie battled insurmountable odds uphill. I was given a great start in life. I got a free medical education, virtually free vocational training in anaesthesia. I lived through the greatest surge in property prices in Australia in history. So I've been incredibly lucky. And for a long time, I actually put nearly all of my success down to luck. Saying to people, I walked the wrong way in a cocktail party and all of a sudden I was the new fellow on the regional committee of the college. Or, I thought I'd, run for council and then before I knew it, I was the president. It took me a long time to sort of own a little bit of my own success, which was due to hard work, and I have numerous university degrees and all sorts of things that I just felt I needed to be considered legitimate. And I still kind of feel like I might have pulled the wool over the eyes of all of the people who've given me various gongs and stuff, and one day they'll all wake up and realise I'm a piece of fluff. So I do have a pretty bad case of imposter syndrome, I must say. And also, being a woman, I have been in receipt of a fair bit of micro-bullying. I am more likely to be called by my first name, for example, and not by my title, by medical students and other people. I've been addressed as young lady in a meeting of Australian Commonwealth health leaders by the chair, that kind of thing. And it's very, very hard to stick your neck out and say, look, please don't speak to me like that when you've got a voice in your head saying, oh, they've finally worked out the truth, So I think a lot of women in my position battle with this kind of thing. But, in recent years, there's been a couple of things that have happened. There's been a lot more opportunities to talk about these issues with the sisterhood and with the brotherhood. The brothers, the bros, are getting on board with diversity of all sorts. And in my experience on committees and on boards of directors and so forth, the most functional groups are always those that are the most diverse. If you get too many women, it's bad. If you've got too many men, it's bad. So, that balance is everything, really, in life.
Completely agree. And I think one of the things that's been most inspirational has been sort of watching you almost like champion that charge with people around you. But I think it's really important for other people to hear that and to hear how you've coped with that, because I don't think you sometimes realize just how inspirational that's been to other people. Could you maybe talk through some of the coping strategies that you've used, or some of the things that other people could maybe emulate to get to that successful position?
Oh, well, I'm a seething mass of insecurities, But, I've worked hard on the personal front to be less self-judgmental and, to be a kinder and fairer person. I don't think you can be a really good leader unless you work on yourself. You can't, it's not just an MBA or a PhD or something that allows you to connect with people and inspire them.
Well, whatever you've been doing, it's really been working. You've gone from strength to strength to strength to, amazing position. I mean, there's a number of those we could pick to talk about next, but let's talk about one of the editor roles. So again, you've been an editor now for the British Journal of Anaesthesia for a number of years. Again, champions diversity in that role. But I think it's often underappreciated just how much work and time and effort goes into that role.
Really like editing and reviewing. And I really want to find the magic potion to get everyone else to love it as much as I do. Because, as you know, it's quite hard to find people to review papers. So I really like it. And it dovetails actually with a few other things in my life that I've enjoyed, which is a hospital and specialist medical college accreditation. I love digging into other people's business. So there's nothing I like better than getting a research paper and reading it and trying to understand what the researchers were thinking about when they designed the trial and what they were thinking about as they kind of wrote up the results. So that's been fun. It's also been great to work with various editors-in-chief over my career. In fact, the person who got me into reviewing was Dr. Adrian Gelb, and a previous president of the WFSA. And then shortly after that, Dr. Stephen Schaefer invited me onto the editorial board of Anaesthesia and Analgesia. Dr. Jim Eisenach invited me to be on the board of anesthesiology, and Dr. Hugh Hemmings invited me onto the board of the BJA. And I'm really grateful to all of them for giving me the chance to craft the literature. I think that's a very powerful and very responsible position.
And it's not just in journals that you've been editing either, is it? And Miller's Anaesthesia, for example, you're one of the 4, if I believe correctly, editors of the new edition of that. And again, I think apart from yourself, the rest are not based in Australia. So that, again, regional diversity, something out of your comfort zone, you seem to just jump from one to the other almost easily.
Well, I am in a very small subgroup of diversity, which is Australian female anesthesiology researchers. But nevertheless, that's given me opportunities I may not otherwise have had, for which I'm very grateful. The editors of Miller all have some kind of connection to UCSF. The current editor-in-chief, Michael Gropper, was a fellow with me when I was at UCSF. And so it was delightful to be invited to be on the editorial board of such an important book. But it's also brought Michael and me and his family back together around golf, which, apart from skiing, my other passion.
Before we talk about the golf a bit more, I'm going to let you announce this, but you've just been awarded some really big achievements, haven't you, particularly in America?
That's very kind of you to bring that up. Dr. Jim Rathmell, who's the current editor-in-chief of Anesthesiology, sent me a text message at 6:00 in the morning, which is common for people who don't live in Australia. People overseas don't seem to have any concept that the time is different in other places of the world. I don't understand why. I've given them an app on their phone. Anyway, he said, "Can I talk to you?" And I went, "Oh, God, there's some problem with research integrity, So I said, I rang him back and he said, "We have awarded you the ASA Excellence in Research Award, which is their Lifetime Achievement Award," which I was genuinely shocked. I know everybody says that they are, because there's so many wonderful people who've discovered much more important things than me. But I have to say it was a big thrill. And I am going to San Antonio in Texas to receive the award.
It's really cool. I really look forward to seeing you collected there. Very well deserved. And whilst we're talking about big awards, I believe there's the AO we should talk about as well. Now, I'm British. I don't fully understand the AO system, but I believe it's the equivalent of what I would call an OBE.
Yes, that's right. So the Whitlam Labor government about 50 years ago decided that Australians could probably have their own awards and not get British ones. And even though we are still a colony of the UK. So it's got a similar structure to the British system, except we don't have knights and dames. I was awarded that, which was fun. And you get to go to Government House in Victoria. It's a Victorian-era Italianate mansion. You hop up and get the award from the governor. And then you go, and I have listened to the Periop profile from Ramani Munasinghe, who lamented the fact that there was no cocktail party. Well, in Australia, there's a cocktail party. So my family and I went directly from the ceremony out for champagne and canapes on the beautiful terrace of this mansion. So it was a big thrill, and it's a badge of honour. It's great, but I hate when people say it's a humbling experience. But it's a humbling experience because when you go there, there are all these people who get the lowest award, which is called the OAM in Australia, and they get it for things like caring for disabled people in the Kerrang nursing home for the last 50 years for free, or saving the possums from extinction, or fighting fires on Black Saturday. And you think, I got it for being a highly paid medical professional with a couple of research ideas who was on a few committees. And these people have made a really genuine contribution. A bit more of the impostering going on there, but you know what I mean.
Yes, I think you've definitely made a big achievement as well, Kate. And I think that's a really nice note to finish conversation on, and we will talk about your golf handicap maybe offline as waves and things are whistling outside the window.
What I would say about golf is that golf has failed to submit to my powerful powers of application and determination, and I'm really cross.
It keeps bringing you back to Ireland. It keeps bringing you back to Tyndall. So it has some positives. Maybe we'll get out on the golf course at some point soon. Thank you very much for joining us on Top Med Talk, and thank you very much for sharing your Periop profile.
Well, it's been a privilege. Thank you.
As always, you can listen to us online on our website, topmedtalk.com. You can find us on your podcaster of choice. If you do find us on social media, we're now on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Blue Sky, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. We're on them all. Hit like, hit thumbs up, give it a subscribe. It really makes a difference. And of course, thank you to our fantastic sponsors. That's BD and GE for keeping this free and open access around the world. And thank you for listening.
Top Med Talk. Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Don't forget to subscribe. Check us out on YouTube and of course on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and X. Also, it's important to remember that Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EPPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that, and the way to do that is eppom.org. Check out our website and find out about some of the incredible conferences we're going to be arranging across the year. eppom.org.